Before you immerse yourself in tonight's terror, hit that subscribe button if you think you can handle even darker stories lurking in the shadows. I never thought I'd end up working at an asylum like this. As a history professor, I've always been skeptical about paranormal stuff. Ghosts, haunted places, all of that, never bought into it. But when the opportunity came up to work as a night guard at the asylum, I figured, why not? It would be the perfect place to write a paper debunking all the ghost stories tied to it. It's infamous, sure, but it's also a bit of a historical goldmine. At least that's what I thought. So, I show up on my first night, pretty confident that I've got this under control. The asylum is massive, this crumbling old building with a kind of eerie beauty to it. You can almost feel the history in the walls, but the place is mostly abandoned, right? Not much going on at night, just me and the occasional stray sound from the building settling. Anyway, I meet the administrator, this older guy, sort of cryptic in a way that makes you feel like he knows something you don't. He doesn't say much at first, just hands me a crumbling envelope. I open it and find a list of rules, written by hand, all jagged and slightly faded. He tells me, in this low, almost too calm voice, "Follow these or you won't last long." I kind of laugh it off. I mean, come on. It's a job. Rules are rules. But I'm not here for the ghost stories. I'm here to prove them wrong. So I figure I'll just follow these rules, stay professional, and document how ridiculous all of it is. Here's what the rules said. Rule 1. If you hear a name called softly, do not respond. It's not meant for you. Rule 2. Never walk down the death tunnel after 2 a.m., no matter what you see or hear. Rule 3. If a patient room door is open, close it immediately. Do not look inside. Rule 4. If you see a nurse in white, say, "I'm not your patient," and walk away. Rule 5. The elevator will take you where you need to go, but only if you press the button for a non-existent floor. Now, these rules, they sounded like folklore, the kind of stories you tell to scare people. I didn't take them seriously. I figured they were just there to keep the night guards on edge, or maybe to keep them from wandering into certain parts of the building. But hey, I'm a skeptic, remember? I wasn't going to let these rules get to me. The administrator gave me this look, like he knew exactly what I was thinking, and then he just walked off. Left me standing there with the rules in my hand, feeling more like a joke than anything. I shrugged it off, just another night shift in a creepy old building. What's the worst that could happen? I didn't think much of the rules as I started my rounds that night. The place felt heavy, sure, but I was too focused on getting through the shift. The second floor was quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched, but I didn't let it get to me. I had a job to do. I passed a few old closed doors. Nothing unusual, just the usual creaks and groans of a building that's seen better days. Then I hear it, a faint whisper. It's my name. No mistaking it, clear as day, but barely audible. Alan. I freeze. My heart skips a beat. I glance around, but there's no one in sight. My first instinct is to turn and walk away, but the rule. Rule 1. If you hear a name called softly, do not respond. It's not meant for you. That's what goes through my mind as I stand there, trying to convince myself it's just my imagination. I don't respond. I keep walking, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. What a dumb rule, right? But in the back of my head, that whisper lingers. I keep walking down the hall, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I'm trying to focus on the task at hand, but the whole place feels off. The air is thick with dust, and the floorboards creak under my boots. I reach the end of the hall, and there it is, room 502. I stop dead in my tracks. Room 502. It's infamous. The rumors say a nurse died there, under mysterious circumstances. Some say she was pushed, some say she took her own life. Regardless, the room's been empty for years. But tonight, I don't know what draws me to it. I walk up to the door, and it's open. Just a crack, but that's enough. A chill runs through me as I push it open slowly. Inside, the room is dark, the window's covered, so the only light comes from my flashlight. My eyes scan the room, and my breath catches when I see the walls. There, right in front of me, scratched into the old paint, is my name, Alan. I blink, thinking maybe I'm seeing things, but no. There it is, clearly scratched into the wall. It's not just written, it's carved deep into the surface, jagged and uneven, like someone had used their fingernails to do it. I take a step closer, my chest tightening, my breath shallow. The scratches, they're fresh. Fresh enough that I can still see the little bits of paint flaking off around the edges, as if they were made just moments ago. I lean in, my heart pounding now. I can't take my eyes off it. The scratches are deeper than I first thought, almost like they're growing before my very eyes. I step back, my head spinning. What the hell is going on here? How is this even possible? I'm alone in this building. There's no one around. Then I hear it again, that whisper. My name, soft and cold, just like before. Alan. I don't wait to hear it again. I turn on my heel and run. I don't care if it's a stupid rule or not. I'm not sticking around to find out what's happening. I sprint down the hallway, my boots thudding against the floor, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I don't look back. I don't even slow down as I round the corner. All I can think about is getting out of that damn room. The air feels colder the farther I go, but I don't dare stop to think about it. I just want to get out, back to the security office, back to the safety of the cameras and the empty asylum. As I reach the staircase and finally slow down, I catch my breath, but my mind is racing. What the hell was that? Why was my name written in that room? And why did the scratches look like they were getting worse the longer I stood there? I can't shake the feeling that something's watching me, waiting for me to slip up. But I'm not going to let that happen. I'll stick to the rules, I tell myself. They're ridiculous, sure, but if they keep me safe, I'll follow them. I have to. But deep down I know that whatever's going on in this place, it's more than just some weird ghost stories. The minutes are dragging on, and I'm starting to feel like this night is never going to end. I check my watch, 1:45 a.m. It's still way too early for any of this to make sense. I make my way down the hallway, trying to push the memory of room 502 out of my mind. The second floor is quiet again, except for the occasional groan of the building settling. Then it comes, a sound. Soft but unmistakable, a stretcher. It's being wheeled down the death tunnel. I freeze. It's not the kind of sound I've heard before. There's an odd rhythm to it, like someone's dragging the stretcher slowly, almost as if they're trying to keep it quiet, but it's impossible to avoid. The wheels squeak, and the dragging noise is like nails on a chalkboard, sharp and grating in the silence of the hallway. I pause, every muscle in my body tensing. The death tunnel. That damn tunnel, the one they always warn you about. Rule 2. Never walk down the death tunnel after 2 a.m., no matter what you see or hear. I glance at my watch again. 1:45 a.m. It's still well before 2. I know what the rule says. I'm supposed to avoid that tunnel. But something's pulling at me. Curiosity, maybe, or the strange feeling that I'm being drawn to it for a reason. I start walking down the hallway toward the tunnel's entrance, my footsteps echoing too loudly in the otherwise empty asylum. The closer I get, the more I feel that crawling sensation in my spine, the same one I felt when I first heard that whisper. I reach the entrance and stop dead. I should have turned back then. I should have listened to my instincts. But I don't. I can't. Just inside the tunnel, I spot them, shadowy figures. At least, I think they're figures. It's hard to make out anything clearly in the dim light from my flashlight. They're moving slowly, dragging something behind them. It's a stretcher, just like the sound I heard. They're dragging a body. I feel a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. The figures move like they're not quite human. They're too still, too unnaturally smooth, like they're gliding across the floor. But their movements are stiff, too rigid, like they're not entirely sure how to walk. I don't know what to do. My legs won't move. I should have left by now, but I'm rooted to the spot, staring at these figures as they drag the stretcher farther into the tunnel. They don't notice me. They don't react at all, like I'm invisible. They just keep moving, pulling the body along behind them. My mind is screaming at me to run, but I can't. It's almost like I'm frozen in place, unable to pull myself out of whatever trance this is. And then it happens. One of the figures turns its head, just slightly. For a split second, I catch a glimpse of its face, or what's left of it. It's pale, gaunt, like it's been drained of life. But there's something else. Something wrong. The figure doesn't have eyes. Not real ones, anyway. Just two deep, hollow pits where eyes should be. I stagger backward, my breath catching in my throat. I don't know why, but that sight makes my stomach drop like a cold hand has just wrapped around my insides and twisted. I barely have time to react before I hear the unmistakable sound of the stretcher scraping across the floor again. And then, nothing. The figures are gone. I blink. I look around, but all I see is the darkened tunnel, empty except for the faint light from my flashlight reflecting off the walls. What the hell? I can't even process what just happened. I check my watch again, 2:03 a.m. I'm shaking. I don't know what I just saw, but I know one thing for sure. I don't want to know any more about it. I turn and make my way back down the hallway, my steps quickening as I move away from the tunnel. My heart's racing in my chest. I can't get the image of those hollow eyes out of my head. After everything that had happened, the whispers, the eerie figures in the death tunnel, and the unsettling feeling that I was being followed, I couldn't shake the dread hanging over me. I was exhausted, physically and mentally drained. But I had to keep moving. I needed to finish my shift, stick to the routine. I was walking down the hall when I heard it. The elevator doors creaked open, and the sound cut through the stillness. I hadn't called it. I hadn't even been near the elevator. But there it was, its old metal doors slowly sliding open with a groan that echoed down the empty hallway. I froze. What the hell was going on? I stood there for a moment, staring at the elevator, trying to figure out if I should approach it. The rules were clear about this place. The elevator wasn't to be trusted. But I had no choice. I couldn't stay in the hall forever, and there was no way I was going back toward the death tunnel. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, I stepped toward the elevator, my breath shallow. My mind raced with questions, but there was no time to answer them. I had to do my job. I pressed the button, and the doors slid shut behind me with a soft thud. The elevator jerked forward, and for a moment, I thought I could hear the soft clinking of chains, like a distant rattling. I didn't know where I was going, but the floor indicator was already lighting up with numbers I didn't recognize. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as the elevator creaked and groaned, like it was moving of its own accord. The floor numbers flickered, going up higher than I expected, beyond the floors I knew. I tried pressing the button for the main floor, but it didn't respond. The elevator kept climbing. Before I could even process what was happening, the doors opened and I stepped out into the hall. It was wrong. Everything about it screamed wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The floor was pristine, the walls freshly painted. Nurses in crisp white uniforms passed by carrying trays of medication, but none of them looked at me. None of them seemed to notice me standing there at all. They moved as if they were in a hurry, like they had somewhere to be, but none of them were acknowledging my presence. I stood there, in shock, trying to make sense of it. This wasn't the asylum I knew. It looked alive, well-maintained, clean, and then I saw it. Down the hall, walking with the nurses, was someone who looked just like me. But it wasn't me, not exactly. This version of me was older, gaunt, his skin pulled tight against his bones. His face was hollow, marked with deep scars as though he'd been through something horrible. He didn't even seem to notice me as he walked past, heading down the hallway like he belonged there. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat. All I could do was stand there, frozen, watching this ghostly version of myself walk away. Before I could make sense of anything, the floor, the whole floor, began to fade. The pristine walls, the nurses, the patients, they all dissolved into nothing, like smoke drifting away on a breeze. The lights flickered once, twice, and the whole scene vanished, leaving nothing but the familiar, decaying hallways of the present-day asylum. I was back in the rotting, decrepit building I knew all too well. The one that smelled of mildew and dust, where the air always felt heavy, like something was waiting just beyond the corners of your vision. But that other place, the one I'd just seen, with the nurses and patients, that wasn't supposed to exist. It couldn't. What had I just seen? Was it a vision? A trick of the mind? Or had I somehow slipped into another version of this place? I felt sick to my stomach, my hands shaking as I leaned against the wall, trying to steady myself. I didn't know what I had just experienced, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't want to go back in that elevator again. As I continued my rounds, the silence of the asylum pressed in on me like a heavy blanket. The flickering lights above seemed to add to the eerie atmosphere, but I focused on the task at hand, trying to shake the unsettling feeling that had settled in my chest. Then, something strange caught my attention. The walls, those cold, sterile walls I had walked past 100 times before, were different now. Black mold was creeping up from the baseboard. It spread slow but undeniable. I frowned. This place had always seemed dry, even for a building this old, but now the mold had started to invade, and I could swear it was moving. The tendrils of black mold stretched upward, twitching like they had a life of their own. I stepped closer, trying to understand what I was seeing. The way it shifted, like it was reaching for something, made my skin crawl. It wasn't just growing, it was moving, spreading at an unnatural pace. I took another step back, but then I felt something wrap around my arm. A tendril, thick and sticky, had latched onto me. I gasped, trying to pull away, but the mold held firm. I could feel it tightening, sharp pain shooting up my arm as it left behind a dark, stinging mark. My skin burned where it had touched, and the pain intensified with every second that passed. I tried to tear myself free, but the more I struggled, the worse it got. The mark spread like poison beneath my skin, a creeping, crawling sensation that was almost unbearable. My pulse hammered in my ears, the air feeling heavier with each breath I took. Desperation set in. I yanked at my arm, but the mold refused to let go. My arm felt numb now, the pain shooting through my body like an infection spreading. I stumbled back, my vision blurring, trying to focus on anything but the pain. I had to get out of there. I had to move, but every step I took felt like it was dragging me deeper into something I couldn't escape. I turned and ran, the pain in my arm burning with every movement. I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the mold take more of me. I didn't stop running. I couldn't. By 3:15 a.m., I found myself back at the death tunnel. It wasn't intentional. I couldn't explain why, but something was pulling me back, something I couldn't resist. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I stayed hidden in the shadows, remembering rule number 2. I kept my body still, my breath shallow, as I peered out from behind the corner. It wasn't just the sound of a stretcher. It was the same shadowy figures, dragging something down the tunnel. I couldn't look away. Then, as they came closer, I saw it. The body being dragged wasn't just anyone's. It was my body. Lifeless, pale, and shriveled with age, my own face stared back at me, unrecognizable and distorted. I froze. My mind raced, trying to piece together what I was seeing, but it didn't make sense. It shouldn't have made sense. There was no way that could be me. But there it was, my body, being dragged down the tunnel by these faceless figures. They didn't even acknowledge me, passing by as if I wasn't standing there at all, as if I wasn't me. I looked toward the nearest mirror, hoping for some kind of clarity, but the reflection that stared back at me was empty. No face, no sign of life. I was invisible, a shadow in the darkness. Yet the figures in the body continued their slow, deliberate journey down the tunnel. I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to understand. They kept going, and I stood there, still trying to make sense of it all. Then something tugged at me. I had to move forward. I stepped closer, drawn to the stretcher, unable to stop myself. My hand hovered above the body, trembling. The second my fingers brushed against it, the world seemed to stop. The body's eyes snapped open, wide, cold, and full of recognition. They locked onto mine, and I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just a body. It wasn't just a lifeless shell. It was me. The truth sank in slowly, like a heavy weight in my stomach. The body wasn't dead. It wasn't just an empty form. The cycle, the rules, everything I had been living through, it was all part of something far worse than I could have imagined. I wasn't just seeing the past or the future. I was seeing myself, trapped in some kind of loop, never escaping. I stumbled through the dark hallways, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. Everything I thought I knew, every rule, every step I'd taken, was starting to unravel. Then, as if guided by some invisible force, I found a hidden door at the end of a narrow passage. It creaked open with a faint groan, revealing a small, dust-choked room. Old records were stacked in haphazard piles, yellowed papers scattered across tables. A thick layer of neglect hung in the air. As I walked inside, the oppressive silence was broken only by the sound of my breathing and the occasional rustle of paper underfoot. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I couldn't stop myself. I started flipping through the records, each one older than the last. My eyes skimmed over the names of patients, dates, and diagnoses. Then, a name caught my eye. Alan Winters. It was my name. Not some coincidence or mistake, it was my name, written in ink on a page from 1926. My heart stopped in my chest. I read the entry again, trying to process what I was seeing. Admitted 1926. Diagnosis mental breakdown. Treatment, long-term care, no family, released after stabilization. The words blurred together, my vision swimming. I couldn't breathe. I had to keep reading. The records went on, detailing my time at the asylum. I was just another patient, just another lost soul trapped within these walls. But it didn't end there. I kept reading, my hands trembling as I turned the brittle pages. It became clear. I wasn't just a patient. The rules, the ones I had followed so diligently, were mine, constructed from the shattered fragments of my own broken mind. I had created them to protect myself from the supernatural forces that plagued the asylum. Forces that I had unknowingly been a part of all along. The rules weren't there to keep me safe. They were there to trap me. I was never meant to leave. The asylum had erased my memories when I was released, resetting me, rewriting my history. I had forgotten everything, and now I was back, caught in the same endless cycle. The administrator, the one who had given me the rules, was no stranger. He was another patient, just like me, caught in the same trap. His warnings, his cryptic words, were never about me quitting the job. They were about me forgetting who I was, forgetting what I had become. "You won't last long," he had said. It wasn't a threat about my job. It was a warning about what would happen if I let the asylum consume me again. If I let my memories slip away, if I let the rules take over, I would be lost to the endless cycle, just like him. Just like every other patient who had walked these halls. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't just fighting the dark forces of the asylum. I was fighting myself. I had enough. I couldn't bear the weight of that place anymore. The rules, the unseen forces, the constant dread clawing at me. I left. I had no choice but to quit. The moment I stepped out of the asylum, it felt like a weight lifted. But as I walked down the long, empty road, there was an unsettling shift in the air, like the ground beneath me was no longer solid. A quiet hum seemed to vibrate in the distance, though I couldn't place where it was coming from. I stopped to catch my breath and looked into a shop window. My reflection wasn't right. It wasn't just that the light was dim, it was as if I wasn't fully there, like I was fading from the glass. I rubbed my eyes, shaking my head. It had to be the exhaustion, I told myself. But then it happened again. In every mirror, every window, my reflection blurred, then flickered, like it was a film reel running out of focus. It didn't make sense. I wasn't imagining it. My own face was slipping away, vanishing as if it had never been there at all. I tried to shake it off, but over the next few days, it only got worse. At home, I noticed dark patches creeping up my walls, thin veins of mold, black and twisting like fingers, crawling along the corners where the wall met the ceiling. It wasn't just in one spot. Everywhere I looked, it was the same. And then I saw it. The mold had begun to form patterns, too precise, too intentional. It looked like the shadows from the asylum, the ones I had seen in the hallways. I tried to scrape it off, but it spread faster. Every time I wiped it away, new tendrils grew back, thicker, darker. I'd barely slept in days, but something told me that no matter how far I ran, the asylum's grip on me wasn't finished. It was never going to be finished. I wasn't free. I was still there, still trapped in whatever nightmare those walls had cast around me. And no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the mold, the shadows, the endless cycle. The asylum wasn't done with me yet. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy stories. Stay safe, and see you in the next nightmare.